In the summer of 1992, the last place anyone saw Raymond Ray Mallory alive was a truck stop crouched beside Highway 81, a few miles outside the Oklahoma-Texas border. He'd parked his faded blue Kenworth in the corner of the lot, nose angled toward the highway like it was already impatient for the road. His trailer was loaded with engine blocks bound for a plant in Fort Worth. It was hot enough that the asphalt shimmered, but Ray still drank his coffee black and steaming. He called home at 9:17 p.m. "Hey, Bug," he said when his 8-year-old daughter answered. "You still up?" Lena tucked the phone between her shoulder and ear, crayon clutched in one hand, coloring book in the other. "Mom said I could stay up till you called." "Then I better make it worth it," he said, and she could hear him smile through a static-lined payphone. He asked about her spelling test, about the dog, about whether the cicadas were still so loud she couldn't sleep. He promised he'd be back by Friday evening. They'd pick up ice cream and drive out to the reservoir to watch the sunset from the hood of the truck, just like they always did after a long run. When he handed the phone to his wife, Claire, the conversation got quieter, heavier. Money, the business, his cousin and business partner, Eddie, always behind on his share. Lena only caught fragments. Not fronting him again. "Told you, Ray, I don't like him owing those people." He laughed it off in that way adults do when they're trying not to scare the kids. Told his wife he'd call again from Fort Worth. Told his daughter he loved her more than all the miles in the world. Then he hung up, slid the receiver back into place, and walked across the parking lot toward his truck, keys jangling in his hand. At 10:04 p.m., the Kenworth pulled out onto the highway. At 10:07, it disappeared from every camera, way station, and patrol sighting it should have passed. No accident. No skid marks. No calls on the CB for help. The truck, and the man driving it simply stopped existing. The first few days, the town searched. Deputies cruised the shoulders of 81 and every feeder road, scanning for torn guardrails or gouged dirt that might mean the rig had gone off the side somewhere. Pilots from the crop-dusting outfit did lazy flyovers, looking for a flash of blue in the trees. Troopers called hospitals in 3 states. Nothing. After a week, the talk changed. Maybe he'd staged it. Maybe the business's debts had gotten too deep. Maybe he'd been running something besides engine parts. The county sheriff, Harold Hal Walker, a heavy man whose mustache arrived a full minute before the rest of him, told the local paper it was possible Mr. Mallory chose to leave of his own accord. 2 months later, the life insurance company opened a file but refused to pay out, citing ongoing investigation. 8 months after that, when no body and no truck surfaced, they relented. Claire Mallory signed her name to a stack of papers at a laminated desk and walked out with a check big enough to pay off the mortgage and put something away for Lena's future. The official story never changed. Ray Mallory ran from the debt, ran from his failing trucking company, ran from his family. The town clucked and speculated and eventually moved on the way towns do. Lena grew up learning how to say, "My dad left when I was 8, without letting her mouth shake around the words. She learned to do it in a way that made people stop asking questions. And for 20 years, that was that. On an unusually dry August morning in 2012, the Clearview Reservoir looked wrong. The waterline had dropped so far you could see the pale stripe of exposed clay circling it like a ring left on a bathtub. The drought had bitten deeper this year than anyone could remember. Cattle ponds were cracked mud, crops were withering on the stalk, and the town council had finally approved a controversial plan. Extend the intake pipes, dredge one section of the reservoir, and lay new gravel for a lower boat ramp. They'll find more beer cans than catfish. One of the older men at the diner chuckled when he heard. He was half right. The construction crew rented a barge and a small, humming dredger. To survey the area they planned to tear up, The county brought in a volunteer dive team from 3 towns over, hobbyists who usually spent weekends exploring flooded mines and taking pictures of catfish as big as Labradors. The divers slipped under the reservoir's surface one by one, fins cutting brief crescents in the water before vanishing into the green. Visibility that morning was maybe 8 feet. The sun sliced down in weak blades, catching suspended silt. The diver in the lead, a woman named Tessa, counted her kicks and watched the depth gauge. 5 feet, 10, 15. At 26 feet, her gloved hand brushed something that wasn't rock and wasn't tree. It was smooth, flaking, curved like a fender. She swam a little farther and ran into it chest first. A metal wall, algae slick but unmistakable. Headlights loomed out of the murk. A grill, the stump of a mirror, a truck. Tessa's brain tried to tell her it had to be some old farm pickup. Maybe some drunk kid had put Granddad's Chevy into the drink in '78 and never told. Then she followed the line of the hood forward and realized the vehicle was massive, the shape unmistakable. Big rig, cab-over engine, trailer still hitched. The truck sat at a diagonal, nose down, front wheels half buried in muck, back end resting against a submerged rise. 20 years of silt had softened its angles, but she could still read the faint outline of letters along the side of the cab. Mallory and Cole Trucking. The rest of the team said later that what made their skin crawl wasn't the truck itself. It was how intact it looked. No obvious crash damage. No torn-off bumper or crumpled cab. Like it had just been parked there, deep under the surface and forgotten. Through the glass, something pale floated and bumped gently against the driver's side window. A skull. Tessa swallowed hard, bubbled out a curse that got torn to pieces by the water, and gave the emergency signal. When the sheriff's office got the call, the new sheriff was sitting at his desk trying to figure out how to make the numbers on his budget spreadsheet behave. His name was Ethan Alvarez, 42, first in his family to go into law enforcement. He'd been in high school when Ray disappeared, old enough to remember the rumors, young enough that he'd believed most of them. When the dispatcher said the divers had found a truck with Mallory and Cole, still faint on the side, his first thought wasn't, "Oh my God," the old case. It was, "My God, Claire." He sat there with the receiver in his hand, the dull hum of the fluorescent light pressing against the back of his skull, and counted 3 heartbeats. Then he said, "Lock the site down. I'm on my way." By noon, the reservoir's little parking lot was a circus of county trucks, news vans, and curious locals craning for a look between the trees. They winched the Kenworth out of the water slowly, chains whining, bilge water pouring from its seams like the truck itself was weeping. Algae sloughed off in long green curtains, revealing rusted blue paint underneath. When the trailer cleared the surface, someone on shore let out a low whistle. The company logo was still just visible, a stylized road curving through 2 last names, Mallory and Cole. The cab's windshield was intact but crazed with fractures. The side window had a jagged hole in it, just big enough to fit a fist through. The diver's tape job made the interior slosh rather than spill, preserving whatever evidence might still cling to the seats. Sheriff Alvarez kept his face professional as he supervised the loading, his hands jammed deep in his pockets so no one would notice they trembled. He'd seen more than his share of bodies. Car wrecks, domestic homicides, the occasional suicide. But 20-year-old ghosts were different. For 20 years, this truck had sat 30 feet down, driver still buckled in, while the town above formed stories to explain his absence. Stories Alvarez, if he was honest, had believed. Now the reservoir had decided to cough up the truth. And somewhere in town, a woman who'd signed her name on an insurance payout in 1993 was about to get a phone call. So was her daughter. When Lena Mallory's phone rang, she almost didn't pick up. It was a little after 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the hardware store was quiet. She was kneeling in the paint aisle, a fan deck of swatches in one hand, trying to help an older couple decide between prairie wheat and buttered biscuit for their kitchen. The number flashing on her screen was local but unfamiliar. Another scam, or church fundraiser, she thought, and her thumb hovered over decline. Then, for reasons she couldn't have explained later, she answered. Mallory Home Center. This is Lena. Ms. Mallory? The voice was male, serious, with that clipped cadence people get when their words have carried bad news before. This is Sheriff Ethan Alvarez. Are you somewhere you can sit down? She laughed automatically, a sharp, awkward sound. I'm at work. There's a step stool. Does that count? There was a tiny hum on the line. Air conditioning. Fluorescence. The sound of her life just before it shifted on its axis. We've recovered a truck from Clearview Reservoir, he said. A Kenworth with Mallory and Cole on the side. We believe it may be your father's. The swatches slipped from her hand. Little rectangles of color, prairie wheat, buttered biscuit, dove gray, fanned out across the worn linoleum like dropped playing cards. Lena stared at them without really seeing. My father left when I was 8, she said. The words came out the way they always did, a practiced shrug of syllables. He drove away. They never found anything. That's why I'm calling, Alvarez said gently. We found someone in the driver's seat. Her throat went tight. No, I'm going to need you to come down to the county building, he said. If you're comfortable, we'd like you to help with identification. Your mother as well, if possible. Mom's at the hospital, she heard herself say, brain on autopilot. Day shift. She's Claire Reynolds now. I know. She's on her way. The world narrowed to the sound of his voice and the furious pound of her own heartbeat. For 20 years, the story had been welded in place. He left. He walked out. He chose the road over us. There were nights she'd repeated it like a curse. There were other nights she'd whispered it like a prayer, trying to make the anger fit better than the ache. Now the stranger on the phone was reaching back through 2 decades and putting a different word in her mouth. Ms. Mallory? He prompted when she didn't answer. I'll be there, she said, and surprised herself with how steady she sounded. I need to see him. The county building squatted on Main Street the way it always had, ugly and immovable, a 2-story block of brown brick and narrow windows. Lena had last been inside when she was 17, sitting in a juvenile hearing room for shoplifting eyeliner from the Rite Aid. The sheriff back then had been Hal Walker. He'd looked at her over steepled fingers and used words like acting out and father figure and poor choices. He'd been one of the last official people to sign off on her dad's missing person report. She wondered, briefly, whether he was still alive somewhere. Belly settled in a recliner, watching the same news alert she'd just seen flash across her phone while she waited at a red light. Body found in truck pulled from Clearview Reservoir. Old missing person case possibly solved. Inside, the air smelled like old paper and disinfectant. The fluorescent lights hummed. Footsteps echoed off tile, and somewhere a copier beeped plaintively. Her mother was already there, perched on a plastic chair in the hallway outside the medical examiner's office. Claire wore scrubs, her hospital badge half turned on its clip. Her hair, once a dark sheet down her back, was shot through with gray and tied up in a messy knot. For a moment, Lena saw 2 versions of her at once. The young woman who'd burned casseroles because she'd forgotten them while staring out the window, waiting for headlights that never came, and the older one who'd relearned routine, relearned how to fill the silence with her own strength. Mom looked up. They're saying it's your daddy, she said in a low, incredulous voice. It can't be. Lena sat beside her. Her knees felt hollow, like someone had removed the bones and replaced them with loosely rolled paper. "He left," she said reflexively. "He drove away." Claire shook her head, fingers worrying the edge of her badge. "If he'd had a wreck, they'd have found him. That's what they said. So he must have..." She couldn't finish it. Couldn't say run the way the town had. The door behind them opened, and Sheriff Alvarez stepped out. He was average height, solidly built, with sleeves rolled up to his forearms and tired eyes. A man built for hands-on work, not press conferences. "Ms. Reynolds, Ms. Mallory," he greeted. "Thank you for coming. How do you know it's him?" Lena asked, and was surprised by the sharpness in her own voice. She wasn't ready to give him that name back. Not yet. "Right now we have circumstantial confirmations," Alvarez said carefully. "VIN matches your company's records. The truck's registration was still in the glove box. There was a wallet on the body with Raymond Mallory's old license inside." He hesitated. "We'll have dental records soon, but I wouldn't have called you in if I wasn't fairly sure." Claire swayed in her chair. "He's been there this whole time," she whispered. 30 feet down and nobody knew. "The reservoir's deeper in that cove," Alvarez said. "Ground's soft. It swallowed most of him. And the water's preserved more than we expected." He cleared his throat. "The coroner would like your assistance with formal identification. After that, I have some questions." "What kind of questions?" Lena asked. "Questions," he said slowly, "about why a man everyone believed had simply driven away, never left the cab of his truck at all." The hallway back to the medical examiner's office seemed colder than the rest of the building. Refrigerated air seeped under the doors. The hum of the lights grew louder. The tile echoed with each step like a countdown. The morgue itself was all stainless steel and white tile. 3 autopsy tables, 6 body drawers, plus a counter with neatly arranged instruments that glinted under harsh light. It smelled sharp and chemical, like something that had been scrubbed and scrubbed but never quite clean. A young woman in a lab coat stood waiting, dark hair pulled back, latex gloves already snapped into place. "Mrs. Reynolds, Ms. Mallory." She nodded respectfully. "I'm Dr. Kwan. I'm very sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." The body on the central table was covered with a pale blue sheet, a shape more suggestion than detail. "We've limited the exposure as much as possible," Dr. Kwan said. "Given the length of time underwater, the appearance is unusual but recognizable. I'll uncover only the head and shoulders. If it's too much, you can step out at any time." Lena's hand found her mother's without either of them consciously reaching. Fingers laced, knuckles white. The doctor folded the sheet down. The water had done something strange to him. He wasn't a skeleton like Lena had always pictured, stripped down to clean white bone. The cold, airless reservoir had pickled him instead. The skin shrunken and tanned like leather, features drawn tight but still eerily familiar. The mustache he'd insisted on keeping, despite her mother's protests, clung stubbornly to his upper lip. The scar along his jawline from when a loading dock chain had snapped and caught him. His nose, slightly crooked from a teenage fight. His eyes were closed. "Ray," Claire breathed. The name tore out of her, soft and raw. Lena's fingers dug into her mother's palm. For 20 years, she'd imagined this face turned away from them, looking toward some new horizon. Toward a bar in Mexico or a line of slot machines in Vegas or some anonymous truck stop where he'd tell a waitress he didn't have family anymore. She had never, even once, pictured him preserved in the dark like this, paused on the last image he'd have seen through that windshield. "Is this your husband?" Dr. Kwan asked, voice gentle but precise. "Yes," Claire said. "That's him." "Ms. Mallory?" Lena swallowed. "That's my father," she said. The word felt foreign in her mouth, heavy and true and wrong all at once. That's Ray Mallory. Dr. Kwan nodded, made a note on her clipboard, and drew the sheet back up to his chin. I'll give you a moment, she said, and moved to the far counter, murmuring quietly with Alvarez. Lena stared at the outline of his face under the sheet. Every birthday he'd missed, every school play, every graduation, the day she'd gotten her nursing license and looked at the empty chair in the auditorium. The night her first serious boyfriend left and she'd thought, well, that's what men do, and hadn't cried because it felt too familiar. All of those moments she'd filed under abandonment, choices, selfishness. They shifted under her feet, like the ground itself had liquefied and was waiting to decide what shape to settle into now. He didn't leave, Claire whispered. He never left. Lena's throat burned. Then what happened to him? As if she'd asked aloud to the room, Sheriff Alvarez came back to their side. There's something you need to know, he said. Dr. Kwan's preliminary exam found evidence of a gunshot wound. Small caliber entry at the base of the skull. Your husband, your father, was dead before that truck hit the water. The fluorescent light above them buzzed louder. Or maybe that was Lena's blood in her ears. Murder, Claire said, like the word itself didn't quite fit. Someone shot him, Alvarez said, then put his truck into Clearview Reservoir. Deliberately. They put him there and left him for us to find 20 years later. If you're still with this story right now, listening as Lena realizes the father she spent 20 years hating never left at all, take a second to breathe. And if you're the kind of person who wants to know how stories like this end, what really happened that night in 1992, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on, because the answers are about to get darker than anything the town gossips ever imagined. They saw the evidence next, not the bullet. Dr. Kwan promised a full written report once she'd finished, but something else. Something that didn't require a microscope or an autopsy table. This was in his jacket pocket, Kwan said, handing Alvarez a clear plastic evidence bag. He turned it so they could read. The paper inside was stiff and stained, edges ragged from time and water, but it had been folded when it went into the pocket, and the creases had protected most of the ink. Lena read the header first. Owl Creek Truck Stop, Receipt Highway 81, Exit 214. Her chest tightened. She'd been there once on a high school date, more out of morbid curiosity than anything else. People still told stories about how her dad had made his last call from that payphone outside. Underneath, the printed lines were faint but legible. November 12, 1992, 22482 Coffee Reg, 1.982 Beef, Sandwich 7.98, Total 9.96, Cash. 2 coffees, 2 sandwiches, nearly 11 at night. Dad never ordered 2 sandwiches, Lena said automatically. He'd skip food before he'd waste money on something he didn't eat. Claire shot her a quick sideways look. They both heard it at the same time. The little reflexive defense, slipping out even now. It suggests he wasn't alone, Alvarez said. Someone else was in that cab between the time he called you and the time the truck went into the water. Who? Claire asked. That's what we're going to find out. The impound lot sat behind the sheriff's station, a sun-baked rectangle of chain link and gravel. Abandoned cars and seized trucks hunkered behind the fence, windows dusty, paint oxidized. Ray's Kenworth loomed at the back, taller than anything else, still dripping reservoir water from its undercarriage like it couldn't quite stop bleeding. Up close, it looked even worse. Algae clung in ragged patches to the rusted blue, chrome dulled to a gray patina. The company logo on the door was ghostly but readable. The words Mallory and Cole Trucking traced faint arcs along the cab. Lena stopped a few feet away, throat tightening. She remembered sitting in this doorway, tiny legs dangling over the side step, while her dad cleaned bugs off the windshield. Remembered fighting with Eddie's son over who got to honk the horn. Remembered the smell of diesel and coffee and spearmint gum. She told herself for years that she hated this truck, that it was a symbol of everything he loved more than them. Now she realized it had been his coffin. "Careful climbing in," Alvarez said, pulling open the driver's door. Floors still slick. The cab exhaled the trapped smell of the reservoir. Algae, old vinyl. Something sour and metallic laced through with the ghost of coffee. A deputy had laid down plastic sheets, but dampness still glistened on the rubber mat. The driver's seatbelt was still buckled. Dr. Kwan's team had cut it to get his body out, but the frayed ends trailed over the seat like mourner's ribbons. On the dashboard, taped just above the speedometer, a photo had somehow survived. The plastic sleeve around it was clouded and spotted, but the picture inside was shockingly bright. An 8-year-old girl missing her front teeth, hair in crooked pigtails, arms thrown wide in a gap-toothed grin. Lena reached out, fingertip hovering just shy of the surface. "He kept it up," she whispered. All this time, it was still there. Claire pressed a hand to her mouth. For years, Lena had imagined him tossing that picture into a trash can at some anonymous truck stop, deciding he was done with the guilt. Instead, he died with it taped exactly where his eyes would fall every time he checked his speed. "There's more," Alvarez said quietly, like he felt the moment and hated to intrude. He nodded toward the sleeper compartment behind the seats. "We found his overnight bag, clothes for a 3-day run, shaving kit, logbook cover. One thing missing." "What?" Lena asked. "The logbook itself," Alvarez said. "Trucker's Bible. Back then, guys like your dad kept everything in their miles, fuel, way station tickets, notes. We found logbooks for the runs before and after in his home office when we pulled the old evidence, but not for that last trip." "Maybe it got lost in the water," Claire said. "Maybe," Alvarez said. "But we did find—" He gestured to a deputy, who handed him another evidence bag. This one held a smaller, cleaner receipt. "Tucked under the passenger seat," Alvarez said. "Same truck stop. Same date, 2110. An hour and a half before your father's receipt." Lena read, "1 coffee reg 0.9, 1 beef sandwich 3.99 paid. Credit name on card, Edward Cole." The name hit Lena like a fist. "Eddie?" she said. "He was there." Claire's hand clenched. "Your father's cousin," Alvarez said. "His business partner." Mr. Cole told investigators he was home that night. Sheriff Walker's notes say his wife confirmed it. "Debbie would have confirmed the sky was green if Eddie told her to," Claire said bitterly. Lena stared at the receipt, at the timestamp, at the ghost of a credit card number. Her childhood reassembled itself around this new piece, jagged edges falling into a pattern she couldn't quite see yet. Every holiday Eddie had shown up with gifts. Every time he'd patted her shoulder and said, "Your old man just couldn't handle it here. Kid, some men aren't built to stay put." Every whispered conversation between him and her mother about the insurance, the loans, selling off what was left of the company. "Why did nobody find this then?" she asked, voice sharp. "If his truck has been in that reservoir since '92, why didn't anyone look there?" Alvarez's jaw tightened. "That," he said, "is a question I'd like to ask Sheriff Walker." Lena didn't sleep that night. She tried. She showered until the hot water turned lukewarm, crawled into bed, and lay there staring at the textured ceiling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's face under that morgue sheet and the receipt in the plastic bag. 2 coffees, 2 sandwiches. At 2:47 a.m., she gave up. She padded barefoot into the small second bedroom that doubled as her office, turned on her laptop, and pulled out a cardboard file box from the back of the closet. She'd taken it from her mother's house years before, during one of Claire's fits of wanting to clear out the past. At the time, Lena had told herself she was keeping it out of spite, out of a need to hold onto some physical proof that he'd been real before he'd vanished. Now, the Mallory and Cole file felt like evidence. Inside were manila envelopes stuffed with old invoices, fuel receipts, faded Polaroids of trucks with dates scribbled on the bottom, and logbooks, stacks of them, their flimsy cardboard covers smudged and stained, pages filled with her father's neat, squared handwriting. She picked one at random, August 1992. The first pages were what you'd expect. Dates, routes, miles driven, off-duty times marked in careful slanted lines. But here and there in the margins he'd written notes. Eddie late again. Customer not happy. Fuel card declined. Used my own cash. Keep receipt. Talked to Claire about maybe selling my share. Tired of covering. In October's logbook, the notes got more pointed. Eddie asked about life insurance. Says we should up the policy. I don't like it. Rumor Eddie playing cards again. Debbie called. Said he was gone all night. Walker stopped me. Asked about side halls. Told him we're clean. Didn't like how he looked at me. Lena's stomach turned. Sheriff Walker had been a family friend. Sunday barbecues, church picnics. He'd ruffled her hair and called her Sugar when she was little. She flipped to the last entries before the missing logbook. Early November. Eddie short on the fuel account again. Said it's temporary. Not sure I believe him. Truck stop guy at Owl Creek asked if we run nights for anyone besides the plant. Told him no. He looked relieved. Why? Claire says we'll get through. I believe her more than I believe Eddie. She snapped the logbook shut, hands shaking. On impulse, she grabbed her phone and scrolled through contacts until she found Uncle Frank, her father's older brother, the one who'd never quite forgiven her mother for taking the insurance check and rebuilding a life without Ray. It rang 4 times before he answered, voice sandpapered by sleep and cigarettes. Do you know what time it is, kid? He grumbled. People with sense are in bed. Uncle Frank, she said. It's Lena. I need to ask you something about Dad. There was a pause. Then the rustle of sheets, the creak of bed springs. You picked a hell of a night then, he said. I saw the news. You okay? She didn't know how to answer that, so she didn't. Did Dad ever talk to you about Eddie owing money? She asked instead. Gambling? Loans? Frank sighed, long and heavy. I told that damn sheriff back then, he said. Told him Eddie was in deep with some boys out of Tulsa. Told him about the time they broke the windows at the warehouse. He wrote it down in his little notebook and then told me Ray probably had debts of his own and just ran. Did Dad? Ray? Frank snorted. Hell no. Your old man wouldn't buy a lottery ticket. Thought they were all attacks on hope. The phone crackled as he moved. Why you asking? She told him about the receipts, the logbook notes, the missing book itself. On the other end of the line, Frank made a low, angry sound. That logbook didn't get lost, he said. Somebody took it. And if Eddie's name is on a receipt an hour and a half before your dad's. He was in that cab, Lena said. He was with him. Then he's been lying for 20 years. The next afternoon, Sheriff Alvarez called her back to the station. Claire was at work. Lena went alone. He met her in a small interview room, the kind with a table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs facing each other like opponents. There was a yellow legal pad in front of him, a manila folder, and an old, battered laptop. You said you had more questions, Lena said, sitting down. I do. He tapped the folder. We pulled the original case file from storage. There are gaps, things that don't sit right with me. He opened the folder and flipped through photocopies of aging reports. Eddie Cole gave a statement in '92 saying, he hadn't seen your father since noon the day of the disappearance. Claimed your dad left the warehouse alone. His wife corroborated his alibi. His wife would corroborate the moon landing happening in the Dairy Queen parking lot if he asked, Lena said. Alvarez's mouth flickered. Not quite a smile. We also subpoenaed Eddie's financial records from that time. Took some doing, but we got them. In the 6 months before your father vanished, he withdrew large sums of cash multiple times, often at a casino in Oklahoma. Right after the insurance paid out, he deposited nearly $40,000 into a new account. Insurance money was supposed to go to my mom, Lena said. Most of it did. On paper, Alvarez said. But the company wrote a separate check to Mallory and Cole Trucking for business loss compensation. Eddie endorsed it alone. Sheriff Walker signed off on the claim. Lena's jaw clenched. Where is Eddie now? She asked. Runs a small fleet out of Amarillo, Alvarez said. Mostly oil field work. Bought his way in around '98, according to the paperwork. I've been in touch with the police there. He knows we found the truck. He closed the folder and opened the laptop instead. We also recovered something from your dad's sleeper compartment, he said. It was wedged behind a panel. The water got into the case, but surprisingly, the contents still work. On the screen, a simple media player window was open. A single file sat in the library. log.1111292.tape. Your father used a microcassette recorder on long runs, Alvarez said. We think he used this to keep an audio log while he drove. He must have digitized some of them. This one's dated the night he disappeared. Lena's stomach dipped. You listened to it? She asked. Once. He looked older for a moment, like the words on that tape had aged him. You need to hear it too. But I want you to know you can stop at any time. We can do this another day. No. The word startled both of them with how fast it came. He was alone for 20 years, Lena said. I can handle 20 minutes. Alvarez nodded and hit play. There was a hiss of static, then the low hum of an engine. A man cleared his throat. Kenworth log, November 12th, 1992, a voice said. Lena's heart clenched. It was strange and familiar at once, like hearing a song she hadn't known she remembered. Left Tulsa at 1,600 hours. Weather clear. Eddie late again. Says he'll catch up if he can borrow a truck from Pruitt's. A dry chuckle. If he keeps borrowing from everybody else the way he borrows from me, we're gonna be hauling air out of an empty warehouse soon. The tape crackled. Stopped at Owl Creek for fuel and coffee, he went on. Talked to Claire and Lena. Kid's spelling cowboy now. Says I gotta be home Friday so we can watch the sunset. I told her I'll be there. He paused. I'll be there. Lena swallowed hard. There was a beep, like someone had stopped the recorder and started again later. 2,310 hours, Ray's voice said. Back on 81. Eddie caught up. Guess Pruitt had a spare heap lying around. He's trailing me by a couple miles. A sigh. He's in trouble again. Says some fellas out of Tulsa are leaning on him. He wants me to. The tape cut off into a squeal of static. Lena flinched. Alvarez clicked ahead carefully, past the distortion, to where the audio steadied again. Don't like it, Ray was saying now, the edge in his tone sharper. Told him we're not hauling anything for anybody but the plant. I got enough to worry about without Sheriff Walker breathing down my neck. Another click, a skip in time. 2,341 hours, Ray said. Eddie flashed his lights, wants to talk. Pulling into the scenic overlook by mile marker, he trailed off. Muffled sound. Ah, hell. Eddie, what are you doing with that thing? Another voice broke in then, slurred but audible. Just pull over, Ray, Eddie said. We gotta talk where no one can see. There was the whoosh of wind as a door opened. The ding-ding-ding of the seatbelt alarm. Feet on gravel. Alvarez let it run until the sound blurred together. Then he paused. This next part, he said quietly, is why I think your father went into that water. Lena's hands were fists in her lap. Play it, she said. Alvarez did. Footsteps on gravel. Crickets in the background. A night wind with a faint, distant rush. You're scaring me with that gun, Ed, Ray's voice said. Put it away. Can't go back without something, Eddie slurred. You don't get it, Ray. These aren't bank managers. They don't send letters. They send boys with bats. Then you should have thought of that before you lost your shirt, Ray snapped. I told you to quit. I told you. A sharp crack. Not the echo of a gun. Something smaller. Maybe Eddie smacking the side of the truck in frustration. Sign the damn papers, Eddie said. Paper rustled. We changed the beneficiary. Just for a while. Walker says it's clean. If something happens, the company gets the money, pays off the note, nobody comes after our families. I'm not making Walker my beneficiary, Ray said. And I'm sure as hell not making you. You think Claire wants a husband with his kneecaps busted? Eddie said. Panic bled through the bravado now. You think she wants Lena watching her daddy get dragged out of his truck by his feet? I think Claire wants a man who doesn't steal from his own business and then ask his cousin to throw himself in front of the bullet, Ray said. We go to the state boys. We tell them about these Tulsa fellas. About Walker if he's mixed up in it. Let them handle it. There was a heartbeat of silence. Then Eddie's voice very, very quiet. You'd turn Walker in? I'd turn God himself in if he came after my kid, Ray said. Something shifted on the tape. Lena imagined Eddie's eyes, darting, calculating. You always were the Boy Scout, Eddie murmured. You know what Walker said? He said if this goes wrong, he's not going to prison alone. He'll take both of us, and Claire and that little girl down with him. I'd like to see him try, Ray said. Another silence. Then, almost gently, Eddie, you shouldn't have said that. The gunshot was small but absolute. A loud pop, a choked grunt, the sickening, heavy thump of a body hitting dirt. On the tape, Eddie started to sob. Oh God, Ray, get up. You're fine, right? Come on, man, I just meant to scare you. Don't do this. There was the sound of something being dragged, boots scraping rock. A door creaked, metallic clanks. The engine roared. Then, muffled as if the recorder had been shoved in a pocket, Eddie's voice again. A different texture, trying on professionalism like a costume. Truck log, he said. November 12th, 1992. Driver Ray Mallory abandoned his vehicle and cargo. Location unknown. I'm taking the load back to the yard. Any questions? Talk to Sheriff Walker. The tape clicked off. Lena didn't realize she'd stopped breathing until her lungs burned. He didn't even try to hide it, she said hoarsely. He just recorded over Dad's log, like it was a housekeeping note. Alvarez shut the laptop, jaw tight. He didn't know the recorder was still rolling, he said. Or maybe he did, but he assumed no one would ever find the truck. Remember, Walker signed off on the abandonment report. If he told everyone he saw Ray drive away toward Mexico, people believed him. Walker knew, Lena said. Eddie shoots my father, and the man who's supposed to protect this town helps him cover it up. It fits a lot of things that never quite added up, Alvarez said. Walker's sudden new truck in '93. His decision to call off search flights after 3 days. The way he steered the narrative toward he ran. Lena pressed her palms flat against the cool metal table. "So what do we do?" she asked. "First thing in the morning we go talk to Eddie," Alvarez said. "Face to face." Amarillo PD offered backup, but I want him to hear this from someone who remembers what he did to this town. To your family. "I'm coming," Lena said. Alvarez hesitated. "That's not standard procedure," he said. "He's a suspect in a 20-year-old homicide. Could get volatile." "He walked me down the aisle when I got married," Lena said. "He stood next to Mom at the burial, with that hands on the shoulders routine like he was holding us up instead of pushing us down. If you think I'm staying home while you haul him in, you don't know me." After a long moment, Alvarez nodded. "You stay in the car," he said. "You don't get out unless I say. I mean it, Lena. If he's been looking over his shoulder for 20 years, he might be more dangerous than he looks." "That's fine," she said. "I just want him to know I'm watching when you put the cuffs on. If this is the kind of story you can't pause, the kind that grips your chest and makes you picture every mile of that dark highway, take a second to hit the like button. It helps more people find these long, slow human stories. And if you want to hear how this ends, don't forget to subscribe, because the last 20 years are about to catch up with Eddie Cole and Sheriff Hal Walker in a way they never saw coming. They found Eddie at a yard outside Amarillo, where rows of battered rigs waited for new paint and new routes. He'd gone soft around the middle, gray at the temples, but Lena recognized him at once. The way he waved his hands when he talked. The way his eyes scanned a scene and then skipped away from anything that hurt. Alvarez and a local detective approached him together, badges out. Lena sat in the back of the sheriff's cruiser, the laptop open on her knees, Dad's last tape queued up, the receipts laid beside her like little stone tablets. She watched through the windshield as Eddie's expression went from annoyance to confusion to something harder when he realized who the man from back home was. She watched him glance past Alvarez, scanning the lot like he expected Ray himself to step from behind a truck and call him out. She watched his shoulders slump when he realized the ghost he'd been waiting for was here in a different form. Alvarez spoke. Eddie talked, laughed, shrugged, gestured with his hands. She couldn't hear the words through the glass, but she could read the old performance. The "come on, man, this is all just a misunderstanding." Then Alvarez reached into his folder and pulled out a photo. Lena knew which one it was. The Kenworth coming out of the reservoir, water sheeting off its nose. The words Mallory and Cole like a voice from the grave. Eddie stopped moving. His face went slack. For the first time, she saw the man he really was, without charm, without patter, stripped down to fear and calculation. Alvarez spoke again, low and relentless. The local detective's hand hovered near his belt. Eddie's mouth moved. Then he shook his head violently, backing away. The detective stepped in. There was a brief flurry of motion, an arm twist, metal glinting in the sun as handcuffs snapped shut. As they turned Eddie toward the car, he saw Lena in the back seat. For a moment, their eyes locked. His expression changed. Something like melted regret and stubborn defiance warring across his features. He mouthed something. "I'm sorry, maybe," or "I had to." Lena held his gaze all the way until Alvarez opened the back door of the cruiser and leaned in. "You don't have to listen to this," the sheriff said quietly, "but I think you'll want to hear how he tries to spin it." She nodded, jaw set. The ride back to the station felt both too long and not long enough. Eddie talked. Boy, did he talk. He admitted to the debt, to the men from Tulsa, to the late-night meetings with Walker behind the warehouse, drinking coffee from styrofoam cups while they circled like vultures around the idea of insurance. But he swore over and over that he hadn't meant to kill Ray. It just went off, he insisted, eyes wet. I was waving it, yeah, but I was scared. He was talking about going to the state boys, about bringing Walker down. Panicked. You gotta understand, they were gonna break my legs, man. My hands. I wouldn't have been able to drive, to work. I'd have been useless. You chose your kneecaps over his life, Lena said from the corner of the interview room. She couldn't help it. The words spit out of her like they'd been waiting 20 years. Over my father. Eddie flinched as if she'd slapped him. It wasn't like that, kid, he said helplessly. Walker, he made it clear. Either Ray played along or none of us were walking away. I thought if I scared him enough, he'd sign. We'd fix it later. I never thought. You recorded your own confession, Alvarez said dryly, clicking the laptop's mouse. You bragged into the tape about him abandoning his truck. You thought you were untouchable. I thought the water would keep its mouth shut, Eddie muttered, staring at his cuffed hands. Nobody dredges Clearview. Not that deep. Walker picked the spot. Said it'd swallow the truck whole. Lena traded a sharp glance with Alvarez. Walker chose the reservoir? The sheriff asked. Eddie hesitated, then nodded once, like a man stepping off a ledge. He said the ground was soft there. Old riverbed. We drove Ray's truck there together. He told me exactly how to angle it, how to put it in gear and jump. Eddie swallowed. He promised he'd write it up like Ray just kept going down 81. Said he'd tell Claire it was probable abandonment. Just paperwork. And the money? Alvarez asked. Insurance paid out like he said. Eddie murmured. Company policy went to the business. Walker took a cut for facilitating. I paid off the boys from Tulsa. Everyone walked away clean. Except Ray, Lena said. Eddie couldn't look at her. You think I haven't woken up every night for 20 years hearing that splash? He said. I tried to make it right. I helped your mama with the house. I made sure you had what you needed. You walked me down the aisle, Lena said, with his money in your pocket. Eddie's face crumpled. Somebody had to, he said weakly. No, Lena said. Somebody chose to. Alvarez let the silence hang for a moment, thick and heavy. Then he closed the laptop with a soft click. That's enough for now, he said. Mr. Cole, you're under arrest for the murder of Raymond Mallory, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and obstruction of justice. Anything else you want to say can wait for your lawyer. As he led Eddie away, the older man twisted his head back toward Lena. For what it's worth, he said hoarsely. Your daddy loved you. He talked about you every mile we drove. Every mile. Lena didn't answer. She knew. She finally knew. She hadn't needed to hear it from the man who'd put a bullet in him. She'd heard it in the sound of his voice on that tape when he'd said, I'll be there. She'd seen it in the photo on the dashboard, edges curled but still carefully taped in place. She'd felt it when she'd stared down at his face in the morgue and realized he'd never looked away from them at all. Someone else had turned the wheel. You'd think that would be the end. It wasn't. Eddie talked. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was self-preservation. Some twisted instinct that told him if he dragged Walker down with him, the fall would hurt less. Either way, within days, investigators from the state attorney general's office were crawling through every box of paperwork Sheriff Hal Walker had ever signed. They found plenty. Seized cash with no ledger. Evidence receipts with lost, scribbled across the bottom in Walker's distinctive, lazy scrawl. A pattern of looking the other way whenever certain names came across his desk. When they finally brought the old man in for questioning, he walked into the room with his shoulders squared, belly still leading the way, mustache bristling. He looked older, sure, but not weak. Lena watched from behind a two-way mirror as Alvarez and a state investigator laid out the story. The truck, The tape, Eddie's confession. Walker listened, expression inscrutable. When they finished, he sat back and tapped one thick finger against the tabletop. "You boys ever run a small town?" he asked finally. Alvarez's jaw flexed. "My job," Walker went on, "was to keep the peace. That don't always mean following every letter some suit in the Capitol office writes down on paper." "Your job was to enforce the law?" the state investigator said coolly. "Not decide which parts of it applied to your friends." Walker snorted. "Friends," he said. "That what Eddie's calling himself now. Kid was a screw-up from the day he could walk. Ray knew that. Whole town knew that. Man still hitched his wagon to him. Loyalty's admirable, but it ain't smart. Loyalty is why Ray died," Alvarez said. Walker's eyes flickered. "You think those Tulsa boys would have stopped at Eddie if Ray had run his mouth?" Walker asked. "You think they'd have just taken their money and gone home? They'd have come for Claire, for the girl, for anybody who could testify." "You don't know that," Alvarez said. "I've been doing this job longer than you've been alive," Walker shot back. "I know men like that. Only language they speak is blood." "So you picked whose blood?" Lena whispered to herself on the other side of the glass. "You decided my father was the one who had to drown." Walker leaned forward. "Ray backed me into a corner," he said. "I told him, sign the paperwork, let us move the policy for a while. Nobody gets hurt." He got righteous, started talking about state troopers, investigations, grand juries, because he believed the law meant something, Alvarez said. Walker's lip curled. "Law's not some golden statue in the courthouse," he said. "It's what keeps decent folks from getting killed when bad men come calling. Sometimes you gotta bend it so it doesn't break." "You didn't bend it," the state investigator said. "You shoved it in the reservoir and hoped nobody ever dredged it up." Walker's gaze slid past them, to where he must have known the mirror was. For a second, Lena could have sworn he saw her. "If I'd let Ray go to the state boys, they'd have rolled into town with their cameras and their questions," he said, his voice suddenly tired. "This place would have been plastered over every news station as corrupt and unsafe. Businesses would have left. Families would have suffered. People like to think they want the truth. Mostly what they want is to sleep at night." "So you helped a murderer dump a truck," Alvarez said. "You signed off on a false report. You let a wife and an 8-year-old girl spend 20 years thinking the man they loved chose to walk away." Walker's jaw worked. "They slept," he said. "Didn't they?" Lena thought about her mother, hollow-eyed at the sink, staring out the kitchen window at the driveway. Thought about 8-year-old Lena listening for the sound of a Jake brake on the highway every time a truck rolled past long after the case file had been shoved into a drawer. "You call that sleep?" she whispered. The state investigator slid a document across the table. "Harold Walker," he said. "You're under arrest for accessory to murder after the fact, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and obstruction of justice." Walker's mouth twisted, like he wanted to spit. Instead, he held out his wrists. "You boys ever run a small town?" he repeated, as the cuffs clicked shut. "You'll understand. I'm running one now," Alvarez said quietly. "And I understand a hell of a lot more than I did yesterday." The trial took another year. Reporters came, cameras. Old rumors got dragged out and re-examined, held up against the hard new light of evidence. Eddie pled guilty to a lesser charge to avoid the needle. Walker fought it to the end. Lena testified. So did Claire. So did Uncle Frank. So did Tessa, the diver who'd felt the truck's grill with her hands in the green dark. The tape played for the jury. The courtroom sat in absolute silence as Ray's voice filled the space. Steady, tired, making notes about miles and fuel, then flaring with anger as he refused to sign his life away for someone else's debt. When the gunshot popped from the speakers, a woman in the back pew sobbed out loud. Walker's lawyer tried to argue about chain of custody, about old technology, about reasonable doubt. In the end, the jury didn't buy it. They found Eddie guilty of second-degree murder and fraud, Walker of accessory and obstruction. The judge, a woman who'd been in Lena's grade school PDA with Claire, looked at both men and shook her head. "You taught this town that the rules don't apply the same way to everybody," she said. "Today, we're trying to teach it something better." She handed down sentences that would keep them behind bars for the rest of their lives. Afterward, in the swirl of reporters and family members and curious neighbors, Lena slipped outside. The courthouse steps faced west. The sky was streaked in orange and purple, the kind of sunset her father used to pull over to watch. She sat on the hood of her car, legs folded, the way she'd sat on his truck as a kid, and pulled a small object from her pocket. The dashboard photo. Dr. Kwan had let her cut the tape and take it after the autopsy was done. The edges were still curled, the plastic sleeve cloudy but intact. 8-year-old Lena beamed out from inside, frozen in mid-gap-toothed grin. "You made it," she said softly, looking up at the sky. "You said you'd be there Friday, and it took 20 years longer than it should have, but you made it home." A warm breeze brushed her face. Maybe it was nothing, just air and temperature and physics. But she tucked the photo back into her pocket and decided it felt like an answer. A few months later, she drove out to Clearview Reservoir alone. The new boat ramp cut a cleaner line into the water. The dredged section was deeper now, the exposed clay gone. Children splashed in the shallows while their parents watched from lawn chairs on the bank, as if nothing out of the ordinary had ever lain buried there. Lena walked to the end of the dock. She stood where, 20 years earlier, Tessa had poked around with gloved hands and found the truck. The water looked ordinary. Green-brown, sun-dappled, hiding sunfish in weeds and discarded beer cans. You'd never know it had once held a secret big enough to rewrite a life. She took the folded receipt from her pocket, the copy Alvarez had made for her. The one with 2 coffees and 2 sandwiches. She tore it in half, then in quarters, then again until the words blurred into confetti. She let the pieces fall from her fingers. The breeze caught them, scattered them across the water's surface. Some would sink, some would wash ashore. Either way, they didn't belong to her anymore. The story they told her, that he'd left, that he'd chosen worm-eaten freedom over his family, had never been hers. It had been Eddie's and Walker's and the town's. She had her own now. Her father had been a man who refused to let his cousin steal from the insurance company. A man who wouldn't abandon his daughter's trust, even when someone put a gun in his face. He died with his seatbelt buckled and his eyes on the road ahead, a photo of his little girl taped to the dash. That didn't erase the years she'd spent angry. It didn't give her back the birthdays he'd missed, but it gave those missing pieces a shape. It gave the silence a reason, and on some days that was enough. On others, she still woke up in the night, hearing a recorded voice say, "I'll be there." On those nights, she whispered back, "You did your best, Dad. The rest wasn't on you." Then she'd roll over, look at the photo in its fresh frame on her nightstand, and let herself sleep. Really sleep, maybe for the first time. In the end, the town learned to tell the story differently. When new families moved in and asked about the old Mallory and coal signs still faint on the warehouse by the tracks, someone would say, "Used to be a trucking company." One of the partners disappeared back in '92. They found his truck 20 years later in the reservoir. Turns out he never left. Other people just decided that for him. Sometimes they'd add quietly, "And his girl helped make sure everyone knew the truth." And somewhere, if you believe such things, a man with calloused hands and diesel on his clothes smiled, checked the photo taped to the dash, and kept right on driving. If this story stayed with you, let me know. Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done if you were in Lena's shoes, or what part of this case hit you the hardest. And if you want more long, slow burn true stories like this, real people, real mysteries, and the truth that doesn't stay buried forever. Hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. It only takes a second, but it tells YouTube to keep bringing you stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.